There is no question that one of the great frustrations about living in an apartment is noise from neighbors. Now, there's noise from blasting televisions and stereos. That's one thing, and you can deal with that on a behavioral basis with the neighbors. But I'm talking about normal sounds of living, people chatting next door, a telephone ringing, that kind of thing. You shouldn't hear that. That's exactly what we heard between the walls of these porches. You see, back 35 or so years ago when this building was built, the porches were open to the outside. They were just screened in. So if people were sitting on their porches and chatting with one another, you'd hear your next door neighbor. Not a big deal. The wall between the apartment is a very thin product covered with some sort of a spray on thing, and the sound was just transmitted very, very readily. Fairly substantial doors closed off the porch from the rest of the apartment, so when you were inside, you weren't really bothered by the noise on the porch. Well, a number of years later, they decided to glass in these porches. They weren't really very useful given the heat and humidity and frequent rainfall and thunderstorms in the Tampa Bay area. So they decided if they glassed them in, they'd be more usable. Well, once they were glassed in, there was no reason to keep those doors closed. Open the doors, you get more light in, more living space. It feels like a more comfortable place. But you could be sitting in your living room and hear one side of a telephone conversation from next door, or you'd hear both sides of two people or three people talking. The apartment next to me was vacant for a number of years, so I didn't think too much about it. But then last year sometime, it got sold, and they decided to remodel it for an incoming owner. That was the point where I decided I had to act. I had to figure out some way to soundproof these porch walls.
A contractor speculated that the wall between the porches was just a thin layer of fiberglass covered with sprayed cement. Remember, the purpose of that wall was only to separate porches open to the weather. Noise transmission was enhanced by a very thin strip of metal, probably aluminum, at the corners. Rather than trying to reinforce this thin wall, the contractor recommended building an entirely new wall. It would eat up maybe 6 inches of space from the small 10 by 12 foot room, but offered the best chance of success. So the project began with building a 2x4 frame for the new wall. Then we added the best soundproofing materials possible. Rock wool filled the cavities of the newly framed wall. Over that, the builder stapled mass-loaded vinyl. The sheetrock was a specially designed noise abatement product called Quiet Rock. Even the power outlet had to be treated. Both sides of the metal strip separating the porches got a thick dose of sound-insulating foam. Finally, the wall joints were sanded, mudded, and painted, and the contractor's man, Eddie, had done a great job. And did it work? That's the key question. While the salesperson had the adjoining apartment open one day, I cranked up the volume on my reasonably high-end stereo beyond a level I would ordinarily use. I went next door and heard only silence. This was indeed mission accomplished.